Hello, Bremer County and all of Iowa. This is Shawn and Emily coming to you from our Deciding Iowa discussion, where we will give an update on the legislative actions and consider the impacts locally and for Iowa generally.
Hi, I'm Dr. Shawn Elbrook. I'm a cancer scientist, a biochemistry professor, school board member, and most recently a House District 57 candidate.
And I'm Dr. Emily Bavers. I'm an obstetrician gynecologist, mother of 3, and a reproductive freedom advocate. So let's start with some positive news today.
Yeah, that sounds great.
The governor's rural health bills, House File 754 and Senate File 575, have passed both the House and Senate with bipartisan support. This bill is intended to provide vital funding to preserve and improve rural healthcare access in Iowa. It'll support increasing graduate medical opportunities in Iowa to bolster trained healthcare professionals, as well as integrate some of the rural workforce incentives. With Iowa being last in the country for psychiatric care, OBGYN care, and near the bottom for several other specialties, this is vitally needed. This is a really great investment for rural healthcare access, and it has support from across the political spectrum, which is really important. And that's what we want, right? So as a physician in rural Iowa, I can clearly say that we need a lot of support in bolstering our rural workforce, and bravo to this.
Well, that's good news.
Yeah. Shall we move on to the less positive,
Yeah,
Shawn?
I'm afraid we have a few things that we need to talk about.
All right. Well, what's on your mind today?
Well, earlier this week, a Georgia jury awarded Bayer to pay over $2 billion in damages over the pesticide Roundup for causing a plaintiff's non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot of money. And in stark contrast, on Wednesday, the Iowa Senate passed Senate File 394 that blocks Iowans from suing any company, including Bayer, over pesticide, herbicide, or fungicide causing their cancer if it is labeled per federal guidelines. Like you, Emily, I am concerned about the health of farmers and rural communities.
Absolutely.
The way the system is set up, farmers feel they cannot produce sufficient amounts of crop to make the business work without these chemicals. I'm concerned they'll have to sacrifice safety as weeds gain resistance, and they get better results using more.
Right, exactly.
Emily, with the passage of Senate File 394, I get the feeling that Big Ag is the puppeteer, and the Iowa legislature, specifically the Senate, is the marionette whose strings are being pulled. And with our scary poor water and the second highest cancer rate in America, the strings are not being pulled in favor of Iowans' health.
Nope.
And the crazy thing is, nearly 2/3 of the corn is going towards ethanol production and not food, distillers' grain feed aside. Iowa's ethanol plants convert corn sugar into ethanol, and in doing so produce a large amount of carbon dioxide as a byproduct. Summit Carbon Solutions would like to build hundreds of miles of pipeline to take excess carbon dioxide and bury it in the ground, taking advantage of some porous geology that exists in North Dakota. Now, in doing so, Summit will also take advantage of the 45Q tax credit, which means the feds will pay them $85 per ton of sequestered carbon. Now, this translates into billions and billions of revenue dollars to Summit Carbon Solutions over the next number of years. Emily, there's a lot of public opposition to this pipeline. Iowans are rightly concerned about the dangers of pressurized carbon dioxide. Whenever the pipeline breaks, leaked CO2 at that pressure can be fatal to first responders and those living nearby. To be clear, this pipeline will be going through Bremer and Butler counties, just a handful of miles from where we sit right now.
Yeah, I think it's going to impact, the track is supposed to impact where I grew up, my dad's farm.
It's going to impact a
lot
of
of
farms.
farms.
Iowans are rightly upset too because this last summer, the Iowa Utilities Board not only grant a building permit to Summit, but also they approve their use of eminent domain to put the pipeline in against landowners' wishes. You surely have seen the sign,
Right.
No eminent domain for private gain, as Summit is a private company.
With billions of dollars in revenue to gain from all this.
True. The public has been mobilized and organized in its opposition, including constant Capitol Rotunda demonstrations, town halls, letters to politicians and media, lawsuits, county supervisors throwing out obstacles. But one of the most outstanding desires of the pipeline opposers is for Iowa legislature legislators to shore up Iowa's eminent domain law to prevent what most consider an overreach by granting it to Summit in the first place. This year, the lower chamber has a number of bills that would help protect landowners. House File 943, which would block Summit's ability to use eminent domain, just passed the House floor a few days ago and will now be moving on to the Senate. That's good news. That's great.
Yeah, that is great news.
The problem is that Republican leaders in the Iowa State Senate continue to resist even discussing eminent domain bills to protect landowners.
That seems really weird. There's so much bipartisan opposition to this.
Last week, Democrats in the Iowa Senate triggered a vote on a Senate Rules Amendment that would force discussion of eminent domain legislation onto the Senate floor. Senate Republicans voted down the amendment 30 to 18 and then accused Dems of playing political games. Emily, I don't think the Senate Republicans liked having their opposition being made so public.
Right, that doesn't add up.
It does not. And to be fair, not all the Senate Republicans voted against the amendment, just the vast majority of them.
Okay, how did our Senate Republican vote?
Well, I know Senator Salmon voted in favor of the amendment, so kudos to her.
Thanks, Senator Salmon.
Iowans, we need to turn up the heat up on the Senate over House File 943.
Great. I agree. This is bipartisan opposition. Nobody wants this pipeline. So why is it still in the works?
Well, I do wonder why the Senate will not work with the House in helping Iowa farmers and landowners protect their property. And why isn't the governor working with the two chambers to get this legislation passed? Why has Pat Grassley been ineffective in working with Senate majority leaders to get eminent domain protection bills done? Why is a group of 40-plus Republicans from both chambers having to work independently to pressure Summit to withdraw their pipeline application?
Why indeed?
Why won't that group work with Democrats? Folks are trying to, as you say, make it add up. And many point out that Summit Carbon Solutions is a subsidiary of Summit Agricultural Group, founded and led by Bruce Rastetter.
That name's familiar.
Yep, Bruce Rastetter is an Iowan who has contributed millions to politicians, including sizable donations to Kim Reynolds and our current legislative leaders. Others point out that the fact that the Iowa Utilities Board, who granted the eminent domain rights and the bill permit, is composed of members who were appointed by Kim Reynolds. What it adds up to is conjecture.
Right.
But it sure looks a lot like Iowa's political leadership is acting on the behest of special interests over the wishes and needs of many Iowans.
I would say so. That math makes more sense now that you talk about the money.
I'm sure. Big Ag is the puppeteer, and the Iowa legislature, the Senate in particular, is the marionette whose strings are being pulled. I'm really worried for Iowa if this pipeline goes in. It will tear up the land, compress good soil into unfarmable ground, is a health hazard, and it will require access to enormous amounts of groundwater to cool the CO2 into liquid. Today and moving forward, water is arguably one of, if not the, most limited precious resource we have. It is utterly careless for Iowa to give water permits to private companies to drain our water supplies without a conservation plan.
Absolutely.
Emily, today was just your average 80-degree March day in northern Iowa.
Whew.
Red flag warnings in January. That's a first. Climate change is real. We need more action on sustainable and adaptive agriculture, not more ethanol plants and carbon pipelines and protecting chemical manufacturers. I wish God's strength to all those red shirt wearing fighters and encourage you all to join their efforts against this pipeline.
Well said, Shawn. I think we all need to really steel ourselves against some of these bills and be prepared to speak up and join the fight where we can. There's one additional topic that I want to bring to the table today, and that's the conscience exceptions for healthcare, which come up in two different bills that both passed funnel week. One is House File 571, which allows healthcare practitioners, institutions, or payers to not pay for or provide a service which violates its own conscience. Now, I know what you're thinking. Everyone should be free to live and work within their own values and ethics. And sure, I agree with that. I do. But what if withholding care because of your ethics means somebody else dies or has a progression of their cancer or heart disease or stroke? What if you have an opportunity to give a life-saving or health-preserving treatment, but you choose not to because of your own conscience? This comes up a lot around pregnant women where care is withheld because of their pregnancy, but their own health deteriorates as they
I've
don't
heard
get
horrible
care.
stories.
As a physician, I set an oath that I will do my best for the health and well-being of my patients, and I will act in their best interests. My patients, not myself. So I would argue if you need an exception to providing the appropriate care, you really have no business being in healthcare.
That's good insight, Emily. And the payer part of the House File 571 bill includes insurers. I hate to give them any more reasons for declining medical coverage.
That would be really catastrophic for a lot of patients. The second bill is Senate File 180, which allows individuals to refuse medical services or orders under emergency circumstances, such as those that arose during the COVID-19 pandemic. And it allows individuals to decline things like mask mandates or quarantine. Again, I think we had a lot to learn and figure out during the COVID pandemic.
We did.
And like most emergency situations, nothing was done perfectly. But I do believe that over time, our ability to handle public health threats has improved. And we've really increased life expectancy and childhood survival and overall health because of working as an organized society to protect ourselves and each other to the best of our abilities. And we know that medical guidelines change over time, and we learn more and we understand more, and disease is better. And I think that that is worth masking for. Come on, folks. We can honor our individual liberties and consciences, but continue to work together for a healthy Iowa and a healthy future.
Emily, I just can't help but feel that this is more manifestation of backlash and mistrust of science.
It is.
It's becoming a theme, certainly in our episodes, but in a lot of the legislative pieces that we see and actions.
I agree.
Well, Emily, the end of next week marks the second and final funnel. What this means is a bill has to pass one of the chambers to stay alive. And remember, nothing ever dies, and a bill or parts of one that might be considered dead can come back as an amendment. So we'll have a lot to discuss in our next episode.
Sounds great.
Well, have a great week.
Thanks. Be well, Iowa.
Be well.